Hey guys, today's interview is with Nico Barawid of Casai. Nico raised the largest Series A ever raised by a company based in Mexico, and he raised it from Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, one of the best investors out there. A lot of the success in raising capital was based on Nico's skill as a storyteller, and so we're going to get into how he did that. If you like this content, please hit that subscribe button, leave us a nice comment in the comments section, and then email us info@foundersuite.com, and I will send you a collection of 40 great pitch decks so you can also improve your own pitch and storytelling abilities. So leave us a nice comment, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and then email us info@foundersuite.com, and I will send you a collection of those pitch decks. For now, enjoy the chat with Nico.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Nico Barawid of Casai coming to us from Mexico City. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me, Nathan.
Glad you could be here. What is the scene in Mexico City like these days in as we're recording this mid-February or late February during pandemic?
Interestingly, I think just like the rest of the world, we just came down from some pretty harrowing numbers with respect to COVID, but I think that there's a lot of buzz on the streets these days. People are traveling back, restaurants are beginning to open, and so it feels like people are done with 2020 and ready to embark on 2021.
That's good. I think it was Mexico's president was on NPR yesterday kind of talking about how Mexico's not getting many vaccine doses and stuff like that. Are people just kind of riding out the storm, or I don't know, is there anything going on there?
Yeah, that's right. I think the latest vaccine penetration numbers are something like 1% to 2% versus, like mid double digits in the US and the UK. But interestingly, there's actually still a lot of vaccine trials happening. And so people are getting inoculated through, through these trials.
Yeah. Interesting. Very good. And well, let's just jump right into what you guys are doing. So what is Casai?
Sure. Maybe let me back up and tell you a little bit about the story of how we started, and that'll kind of motivate a little bit of what we're actually doing. So
Please.
I am currently in Mexico City, like you mentioned, but prior to that, I was living in the Bay Area for 5 years. And my most recent gig there, like I think all of the Bay Area, was working at a startup. I was at a fintech startup called Nova Credit. And I was very early there. So I was the very first business hire. And when I left, my role was to run international expansion and business development. And so, as you can imagine, I was traveling constantly for work. And because it was a seed stage company, and unlike when I was a management consultant, the budget was for kind of Airbnbs as I was traveling for work. The issue, though, was that I was consistently let down by the quality of short-term rentals. So to give a funny example, once I booked an Airbnb in Bangkok for my CEO and me for a conference that we were both attending. I showed up and there was no Wi-Fi. And the host was almost blaming me for not having read the description. And she was like, it doesn't list Wi-Fi, but I don't know anyone who books an Airbnb and assuming that there's not going to be Wi-Fi. So right. Ultimately I had to book a hotel. And so, these kinds of experiences kept happening. But as I mentioned, at the same time, I did not stay in hotels. They were in boring business districts. They were too expensive for the startup budget. And so I became obsessed with finding a better way to travel, and particularly in the emerging markets. And so in one of my trips to Mexico City, I met my co-founder, Mari Carmen, who at the time was an executive at one of Mexico's largest hotel operators at a barbecue. And we brought on board our CTO, Andres Paez, who was a software engineer at Google for 5 years. And we created Casai, which is Casa Inteligente, so smart house. And really that shows what we're doing, which is we're bringing technology to basically building an emerging markets hospitality brand. And we offer beautiful and intelligent living spaces. Mm-hmm. And And so our standard of excellence for what we offer, for example, includes amenities, locally sourced design, and that smart technology piece that I mentioned. So smart check-in, Google Home, et cetera. And the company that we're building is very much built with a nomadic generation in mind, which was relevant prior to COVID, but has very much accelerated in importance with the new post-pandemic travel landscape.
Yeah, no, definitely interesting. And so where do we start? There's a couple of things I want to probe there. So I guess why Mexico? Is it just because your co-founders are there? Or like what's unique or interesting about the Mexico City market as a starting point?
Yeah, I can tell you the macro reason, which is my fake reason for moving to Mexico, then I'll tell you my real reason. The macro reason is that Mexico is one of the largest hospitality markets in the world. And Mexico actually was one of the top 3 countries that recovered fastest with respect to travel post-COVID. And so from the perspective of a market to start a hospitality brand, Mexico is as good as it gets. That's the macro reason. That's kind of fake. The real reason is personal. So my husband actually himself was a startup founder in the Bay Area. His company was acquired by a company in Mexico City. And so then I moved, and that is the genesis of why Mexico is our starting ground.
Okay, makes sense. And then let's talk about the smart tech angle a bit. Like, what does that mean? I mean, I guess what's the real, magic, unique sauce of this, and how is it, as a pessimist would say, how is it not just a Airbnb clone for Mexico or something?
Yeah, no, totally. Actually, we don't see ourselves as competition with Airbnb. In fact, we work with Airbnb very closely, and we work with Airbnb in the same way that Hilton works with TripAdvisor, or Hilton works with Hotels.com, for example. So Airbnb for us is very much a distribution channel. And then from Airbnb's perspective, we help provide them high quality inventory on their platform. Because we actually control the inventory, unlike Airbnb, which is just a platform, there's a lot of aspects in the guest experience, especially where technology can come in. So for example, what has now become a de facto in the hospitality world, we were working to prior to COVID, which is keyless check-in and having an app where you can open the door from your phone. Things like Google Homes and Chromecast powered TVs that allow us to disseminate information to our guests. Whereas if you think about a traditional hotel, if they want to change the price of one sandwich on the room service menu, they have to reprint like hundreds of room service menus, whereas we can just do that on the Chromecast. And then we also have a piece of hardware in our apartments called Butler, which allows us to, it's a sensor that allows us to do things like monitor whether the Wi-Fi is down, for example, so we can be proactive with the guests that, we're experiencing Wi-Fi troubles from the ISP, or, if we can proactively know if the guest is going to have noise complaints, for example, by monitoring the decibels, in the ambient environment. And so things like that allow us to have a better and more proactive guest experience. And in fact, I think that we're probably the only hotel in the world that has an in-house R&D function for hardware, which is exciting.
I was going to say, did you guys develop Butler, or is that something you can buy from, Best
We did develop it in-house, although we are working with property managers now that are effectively looking to franchise our name. And the idea is at some point we will license some of this in-house technology that we've built, so that if an enterprising property manager in a city that we're not going to expand to says, I want to be a Casai and I want to have all of these amenities, then we can allow them to use our technology.
Okay, cool. The properties themselves, are these owned by individuals like many Airbnbs are? Or are you guys actually owning the inventory, or some hybrid?
We are not owning the inventory. We are working with we're working with asset owners that range from individuals to large institutional players. And the way we work with them also runs the gamut from direct rental. So we actually pay them a fixed rent every month to, they pay us a percentage of their income for managing their property. And so we have lots of different ways that we work with partners to get the best inventory onto our platform, so that to our guests, we can offer the best spaces in Mexico City. And, for example, we just expanded to Cancun and Puerto Vallarta and Tulum. And so in those cities, we find the best inventory and then figure out how we can work with the landlord to offer that.
Yeah, cool, cool, cool. How many properties do you have online?
Right now, we have almost 300 across several different cities in Mexico. A lot of our portfolio is in Mexico City, but we've been exploring destinations, like I mentioned, Puerto Vallarta, Cancun, Tulum, where our guests say like, hey, post-COVID, I want to work from Tulum for 3 months. And so we listen to them and are offering them a solution there.
I love how you're hearing all these sort of stories. I think it's Punta Mita. I spent a lot of time in Mexico, and you're hearing all these resorts that are catering to folks that are like taking a long-term, work from home, setting up like tutoring for the kids and a workspace for mom and dad.
Yeah.
Like it's brilliant.
And that's what I mentioned, like, the model that we were building was important prior to COVID, but is all the more important post-COVID, because if you're someone that is bringing your, family of 5 down to Punta Mita, to use your example, you're not going to want to stay in a 150 square foot box of a hotel room, right? You're going to want to stay in a place that's more comfortable, that has a terrace, that has a kitchen. And so we found that exactly what we're offering has been highly demanded post-COVID, to the point actually now that we have 95% occupancy.
Oh, wow. Good for you. Very cool. I have to check this out whenever we start to travel.
Please do. Let me know. We'd love to host you in any of our cities.
Oh, I love Mexico. What's your favorite resort town in Mexico, or any?
I like that. Yeah. I like the small ones. So prior to moving here, the ones that I knew were all the ones that everyone visited, like you mentioned, like, Puerto Vallarta or Cancun. But I've been learning where Mexicans themselves like to travel to the beaches. And so there are some small towns that are like Ixtapa, for example, or one that's no longer that much of a secret, but Puerto Escondido, which is a hippie kind of surf town. All these places are amazing.
Mm-hmm. I think my wife and I did a sailing trip for 7-8 months, just down the coast of Baja, then up the Sea of Cortez, and then
amazing.
And I just sailed around and hit all these little towns that I don't even remember most of their names, but there was some really cool stuff.
And they have the best food, those small towns.
Yeah. The shrimp Diablo, which everyone has,
just like all of the fish tacos and ensenada, like they're amazing.
Yes, I can't wait to go back. So I'll hit you up for a
please. Exactly.
No, cool stuff. So let's talk about raising money for this. So you guys how long you been around, and how much you guys raised?
I started in February of 2019, so exactly 2 years. Our seed round was about $5 million, which we raised from the 2 largest VCs in Latin America, Monashees Capital and Kaszek Ventures. That was very intentional to raise from local market experts. As I mentioned, I came from Silicon Valley, and so that's where all my network was. But I wanted to make sure, as we were starting the company for Mexico, that we got the best knowledge on the cap table. So that was $5 million from the 2 largest VCs. And then we also raised a total of $48 million for our Series A, which was led by Andreessen Horowitz. So 23 of that 48 was in equity. And we had a bunch of exciting financial sponsors for that equity round, including founders that I really respect in the region, in addition to 25 million, which was a debt facility from TriplePoint Capital, which is one of the largest venture debt lenders in the US.
Interesting. Let's go. I definitely want to spend some time on the Series A because that sounds cool, but let's go to the seed round real quick.
Sure.
How did you put that together? How did you figure out to, contact Monashees and Kaszek? Is that the other one? Kaszek,
yeah.
Like, how did you break into those? How did you get connected to those? Just talk about putting that round together.
Yeah, honestly, it was. I wish I had better stories for either round, but it was very much the tried and true adage of when you're asking for advice, you get capital. When you're asking for capital, you get advice. I was asking for advice and got capital. So what happened actually was, as I mentioned, all of my kind of venture network was in the Bay Area. And so I was just trying to network around in Latin America. And anyone that is raising money in Latin America knows to go to Kaszek and Monashees. They are, as I mentioned, far and away the most successful VCs in the region, and every single kind of unicorn or successful exit can be tied to one of those 2 firms. And so I remember I was talking recently to Marcelo Lima, who is my board partner from Monashees, and he mentioned that on the same day he had gotten 5 separate people who asked him whether they had spoken to me, because I was, looking to start this new business, and he said, "Oh wow, I know that I have to go talk to these guys." And so if there's any piece of advice there, it is I think it's common knowledge that your intro to a VC really matters, like how warm is that intro. But I think what's less talked about is basically that obviously you don't want to overdo it with VCs where you try to like talk to every single person that they know and then ask for intros, but having kind of a preponderance of inevitability with your company, with these VCs, makes it much easier to begin the conversation like on a different foot than just any other founder out there.
Now, that's an interesting phrase, preponderance of inevitability. Did you coordinate that effort of, like you figured out a few people who did know Marcelo and kind of asked them to make an intro all at the same time, or how'd you coordinate?
No,
that?
actually, I wish, it would have been a brilliant strategy if I had, but it was all accidental. And as I mentioned, things move so fast with my seed round. I think I closed my term sheets with Monashees and Kaszek like a couple of weeks after my first conversation with them. And so I don't think it's about me as a founder. I think it's a combination. It was a combination then of a business model that lots of people were excited about, me and my co-founder bringing in a combination of Silicon Valley high growth tech expertise and her bringing local market expertise. And then candidly also just the LATAM venture ecosystem being smaller, such that, as I meant, it's like kind of inevitable that you're going to end up in the hands of one of these two VCs, right?
That was kind of my next question, is like, what was it about your deal that was so appealing or interesting? So did you have much traction at that point, or was it more just like the team combo and background that was getting them? Why did they invest?
No, I liked, there was a PowerPoint at that point. There was literally zero traction. And in fact, at the time, I was still employed at my old startup. Like at the time that I had signed the term sheets, I had not yet given notice at Nova, where I was. And so I feel extraordinarily fortunate for how my seed round went. As I mentioned, in retrospect, as I think about why did this happen so quickly, one is, at the risk of immodesty, I think we did articulate a very compelling vision for what we wanted to create. And so, VCs like to bet on founders that are ambitious to the point of crazy. I think that's exactly what I am. And then second, the business model was very much in vogue at the time that I was raising, and that there was just like a white space for a company with the right founding team to do this in Latin America. And so I think our investors had been looking to fund exactly this business model for probably a couple of years up to that point. And it was very much right time, right moment, right team.
Yeah, no, that's good. I love that phrase, sort of the ambitious to the point of crazy. I like that. Any little nugget about what was a signal of that? Like just, your plans to dominate all of LATAM or something, or is there anything, colonizing Mars?
Yeah, our next expansion is interplanetary. So when people ask me what is my ambition for Casai, this has remained consistent since February of 2019, which is very singularly to create an iconic consumer brand. So in the same way that Google has become a reference verb for how you search things on the internet, or Airbnb has become a reference noun for how you travel in the new reality. That's a kind of brand that I want to create. And someone that says that without joking or exaggeration, like I just did, is an insane human. And And I think it's that level of insanity, that level of almost hubris that VCs are looking for, in addition to obviously other proof points. Like, I am a former management consultant and I did work in Silicon Valley for a few years. And so I have kind of the background to back up why I am the right person to do this. But I think making big, grandiose statements like that, where I will stop short of nothing to accomplish that, is probably a sign of like chutzpah that's required to start the business.
Sure. No, that's good. What's the Spanish word for chutzpah? Is there a
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to ask the many Mexican Jews here.
Funny. Cool. All right, let's go to the Series A round led by
Sure.
Andreessen Horowitz, which is exciting. So now you're taking a shift away from raising money from Latin American investors into going back to Silicon Valley. So kind of talk about when you knew it was time to go raise more money and why you decided to go to Silicon Valley, and tell the story of that.
Yeah, it had always been my intention to get a Silicon Valley venture partner on the cap table and in our side of the net. And that is because I had gotten the two best local partners, and as I mentioned, my ambition was very much to dominate the world and to create an iconic brand. And what better place to get that advice than Sand Hill Road, right? So it was always my intention to do that. When I was narrowing down the list of potential partners that both had a track record of success by backing firms like Airbnb and Facebook, and also had actively looked at Latin America as a source of deal flow, that the list of firms that was in the middle of those two circles of the Venn diagram was exceedingly small. And so I basically had my target list set out for me. And so that's kind of like how I decided the kind of short list. Your question too was around how did I know that I wanted to raise? When we closed our seed round, it was clear both in my pitch and also in the strategization afterwards that the number one thing that we had to do was prove that we could grow on our supply side, meaning that we had to sign up real estate partners onto our platform, grow our inventory, and then sell it. We knew that we could sell it. We routinely had 100% occupancy, but it was unclear that a small player like ours could convince the sort of big guns in real estate to partner with us. Once we had a track record of that, so a track record of Mexico City's largest landlords and asset owners working with us, then I knew, okay, we've proven our quote unquote concept. Now let's raise capital to step on the gas for international expansion specifically. And so that was how we knew. And so then I went back to my short list and I said, okay, who do I want? A16Z was far and away at the top of my list. I told Angela that the first day we met, and it continues to be true. And Angela Strange, who's my board partner, and I really hit it off in the first instance. And Matt Heffemeister, who also sits on our board as well, who's at A16Z. We just have such an amazing relationship. And so I knew from even the very first call that it was very likely that something would happen.
Yeah. How did you know they were interested in LATAM? Have they done a bunch of LATAM deals? I don't know their portfolio intimately.
Yeah. They have, I think 4 investments, maybe 5 in Latin America. And it's the very best companies in Latin America to have emerged over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I knew that they were the kind of gold standard for Silicon Valley interested in Latin America. Interestingly, actually, several other firms have in the last year done their very first investments in Mexico specifically. And so we see partners like Founders Fund, NXL, and previously like Sequoia had backed like some companies in Brazil as well, and Rappi. And so now we're seeing the very top echelon of Silicon Valley VCs seeing the opportunity in Latin America.
That's cool. That's great. You identified Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, as like your dream partner. So do you go straight to Angela Strange and make your pitch, or do you kind of warm up on a bunch of other investors first? Do you run a full-on bake off, or do you just kind of go and go to the person you want to marry and propose?
I had gone to a few partners, but ultimately it was actually the latter. I basically was like, I hope Angela likes me back.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of sort of connections to A16Z. One was the main one was through one of my angel investors from the seed round named Florian. His company Loft is also an A16Z company in Brazil. And so he introduced me to Angela. And again, like I had spoken to a few other folks, got several term sheets, but ultimately A16Z was the partner that I was the most excited to do something with.
And it's just one of these little nuggets of advice. Do you hear people talking about like, go hone your pitch on kind of your B list and then put your A list, your Andreessen Horowitz, later, I guess. I don't know.
That probably would have been smart if I had done that. I did not do that. I think because I was so like narrowly excited about so few, there was very small B list.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's probably great advice.
And I think I saw in the press release, it was the A16Z Cultural Leadership Fund. What is that all about?
Yeah, A16Z is amazing in how they promote diversity on all angles. So diversity of founders, diversity of partners, and this is specifically diversity of their LPs. And so they have a fund that has been funded by super prominent LPs in the entertainment space. And so they co-invest with A16Z in a lot of their investments to basically connect really top people in showbiz with the top startups who might otherwise not be connected.
Interesting. And does that translate into any, are these LPs who are celebrities and entertainers, can you lean on them for anything? Are they helping advise or promote you guys, or, what's the takeaway from that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, right now, as I mentioned, we're doing an expansion outside of our core urban destinations. And so we're very much excited about hosting some of these investors in our sort of tier one locations. And so, for example, we recently signed up a property where Kim Kardashian used to stay. And so we would love for, some of these stars to bring visibility to Casai in these places.
Got it. So you're hoping the Instagram hashtag, comes through, something like that. Very cool. Excellent. Any other just like net benefit of partnering up with Andreessen Horowitz? What's it like? It sounds so great from the outside. What else do they bring? Like, how often do you engage with them? Are they doing other things for you? What is it? What's it like?
They are amazing. And one of the reasons that I was so excited to work with them was their very kind of well documented and famed services model, where actually right after we had formalized the partnership with A16Z, I was part of another pitch, but this time it was the reverse pitch, where all of their operating partners, so the ones in charge of recruiting, the ones in charge of marketing, the ones in charge of connecting startups with big corporates, basically pitched me all of their services, which was just amazing. And so the reason why it's so great to work with A16Z is because they care so deeply about thinking about how they can help their startups that it just shines like far and ahead the rest. Angela and I talk every other week, and literally the first question that she asks me in every single chat is like, how can I help you more? It's amazing. As another anecdote for why A16Z is so great, they send periodic kind of feedback surveys to the founders about every part of the firm, including the operating partners and including the GPs. And in the GP feedback form, it says, how supportive is this partner? Can you count on them to, support your craziest ideas or help you think through them? And so a firm that says like basically how much of a yes person is your board member really prioritizes thinking outside the box.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember when they started that services model, and it was very clever. It's just like no other VC, all VCs had been offering advice for forever, but like actually the services of PR and recruiting and all the other stuff is like, that's
Exactly.
hugely valuable. That's great.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just yesterday I was talking to someone on their marketing team about, how do we put our name out there more in conferences and in op-eds and things like that. And she had this she was like, oh, I've done this with like 10 other startups. Let me actually introduce you to a PR firm that focuses on this. And like, here's how you should think about the brand, et cetera. And like, just having that as at your fingertips as a first-time founder is so invaluable.
That's cool. That's cool. Good stuff. Any just general tips for, if another founder who's watching this identifies Andreessen as A16Z as like the target for them? Any tips for pitching A16Z is my question.
I'm not sure that there's actually anything specific about pitching A16Z, except for A16Z has now begun to kind of specialize in certain verticals. So like I did not pitch anyone that was focused on enterprise. None of the enterprise GPs were in my pitch. They also have obviously a separate bio fund and a separate crypto fund. And so that was a whole different world. The people that were in my pitch were very much consumer and fintech focused.
Yeah.
And so the questions that came my way were very targeted on like, how do you build both sides of the marketplace? Like, how do you finance your growth in an equity efficient way and all of those sorts of things. And so I would say, obviously know your business inside and out whenever you pitch A16Z, but that's especially true given the specialization of the pitches that they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Good stuff. All right. I won't keep you too much longer. How are you thinking about future fundraising? Do you sort of go from, I think you sort of teased it in that last statement, towards more equity rounds to more like debt financing, or, I don't know, have you got a funding strategy going forward?
Yes, we are thinking about our cap table and capital stack and how we can be most efficient with it. Obviously, growing via equity is extremely expensive. And so to the extent that we can finance our growth through debt, that would be perfect. But at the same time, we do know that equity financing is like manna to startups and founders. And so we are planning on going out for financing in a few quarters once we have proven our expansion story. 2020 was a year that we did not expand. It was very much a year where we focused internally, obviously in the interest of both preserving capital in addition to building a brand. But 2021 is going to be the expansion year that we hope that 2020 would be.
Good for you. How do you kind of decide on that balance or lever between equity and debt, especially given kind of what you guys do? How do you?
I think debt is very good for models that are proven to be very cash generating, but could potentially be very kind of capital intensive. So to use one example unrelated to us and then one example related to us, well, the first example is kind of related to us, but I know there's lots of very attractive non-dilutive financing options for companies that have a very good formula for digital marketing spend in, revenue out, right?
Yeah.
And to the extent that you've kind of identified what that coefficient of conversion is from spend in to revenue out, then it becomes very good for debt financing. And there's no reason that you should be raising equity for that kind of thing. And we ourselves are beginning to reaffine that coefficient. And the second thing is like, for our business, for example, we put money into CapEx and furniture when we furnish our units. That's our biggest line item on cash. And then we get that money back as guests stay with us, and we can, continue to have our high occupancy numbers. And that's a pretty proven model, just like in the digital marketing space. And so something like that, where we have big expenses at the beginning, but then we can amortize those expenses throughout the life of our properties, is perfect for debt. And so it would be foolish of me to raise equity to finance that kind of growth. And so that's how I think about it. What makes sense for me to raise equity on is to hire more engineers, to build more tech products, to continue to create our moat as a tech brand. What doesn't make sense is to raise equity money to buy couches.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's a great way to kind of just simply frame it. I love it. All right. Non-finance related question. How are you
Oh,
guys?
Nathan, I love the finance related questions.
You like the
That's
finance?
okay.
Well, it's good stuff because everyone, probably 90% of the people listening to us are figuring out how to raise that first round. But then once you get on that first round, then you got to think about the capital stack, right? And how you kind of balance this out. And
totally.
Yeah, it becomes important. So on non-finance, more strategy. Here's your management consulting hat. How are you deciding next markets to go after? I think that would be interesting. How do you kind of break apart LATAM and decide where to go next?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about how we were thinking about it prior to COVID and how that's changed. So prior to COVID, it was very clear that we were looking very much at the kind of large urban centers of Latin America. Latin America is a very urbanized geography, actually. And so cities like Sao Paulo and Mexico City and Bogota control a very large percentage of those countries' GDP, right? And so for us, just looking at the sort of macro picture, it was like, okay, we want to be in these capital cities. However, now with remote work becoming more kosher and with tourism shying away from cities and towards more remote destinations because of COVID, people just aren't traveling to those major cities as much. And so that kind of very simplistic analysis that we did of like, where is GDP centered in these countries doesn't really apply in reality where consumer travel preferences are shifting so rapidly, and in a world where business travel is depressed for the next several years. And so what that means is that we're asking our customers, we're no longer pretending to know where they want to travel to. And so the reason that we chose the initial leisure non-urban destinations that we did is because our customers said, I really want you to go there. And if you go there, I will be your best customer. And there's no better sign of product market fit than like when your customers tell that to you. And so that, at least for the next, year, will dictate how we think about our growth. And then we'll monitor how, traditional business travel returns and whether we continue on our old pre-COVID kind of expansion analysis.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. I finally remembered the favorite place we went on our sailing Mexican journey.
Where was it?
Barra de Navidad. You've been at Barra.
Oh, nice. I've never been there.
It's just really cool. It's this narrow channel. You gotta like carefully navigate in with your boat, and then there's this like protected lagoon, and it's just a fun scene in there. So
Mexico has some just absolutely gorgeous places.
Yeah, this talk is making me want to travel. All right, last question. I'll let you off the hook. Any other tips or advice we haven't covered? Any advice you would give your younger self if you were doing this all over again, or anything else you'd like to share?
I think part of the reason that I've had some fundraising success, again, at the risk of immodesty, I don't equate fundraising success with business success, but I have raised quite a bit of money, especially in the local geography. Part of the reason that I think that has been true is because I am a storyteller. I can tell a compelling story about what I want to build, how I want to build it, why I want to build it. And that there are power curve returns to someone that's very good at storytelling. One is obviously you can raise the best capital. The second is that you can attract the best talent. And the third is that you can retain that talent once they work for you. And so I would tell myself to really lean in on that. And I would tell future founders to really tell a compelling story about the many billion-dollar business that you want to build.
Did you get any training in that, or did you just come by that naturally? Did you develop the storytelling over a period of time, or is again just natural?
I've reflected upon this when I got the feedback for why investors decided to back me, and I think actually it was because of my last role where I was again like leading international expansion, but specifically doing business development and sales, you can't sell without telling a story for why your product should be bought. And so I think that actually kind of honed that talent.
Got it. Awesome. All right. I'll let you off the hook. If people want to learn more, it's Casai.com. What is it?
Yeah, that's right. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Nico Barawid. I'm always happy to talk to aspiring founders, especially those in Latin America.
Excellent. I'm sure you'll get some pings from that. So that's very generous of you. All right, Nico, thank you very much. Good luck. I'll follow up after your next round. We'll see how your capital stack has evolved. How about that?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nathan. And it was great to chat.
Thank you, sir.